Erantal, Magician's Guild. If one were to climb the multiple staircases to the top floor of the illustrious Magician's Guild, a strange place of sorcery to those who were uninitiated into the organization, they'd be greeted to a wide hallway with 3 doors forking off to different rooms. In the room on the left, multiple ancient and powerful tomes of magic were locked away and zealously protected by multiple enchantments and curses. On the right, the room contained 2 powerful artifacts that supposedly dated back to the time of the 8 Greed Kings. This room contained similar, if not even greater, protections from potential thieves that would be tempted by the value and power of these artifacts. Yet, the greatest protection for either of these rooms was believed to be not from the spells protecting them, but from the Guildmaster's office being located between these 2 rooms. From the staircase, a mage in a green robe quickly walked up the steps and onto the red-carpeted floor. In the mage's left hand was a scroll sealed with wax and stamped with the guild symbol of a hand holding a spell. In her right hand, a few documents that were held without the same gentle grip as the scroll. The mage, a woman with blue hair that had been tied into a messy bun, had an expression on her face that was a mix of excitement and fear. In a few moments, she had arrived at the door leading to the office of the Guildmaster, a strong mage called Theoruksha. Taking a moment to smooth out the wrinkles in her robe, the woman then knocked on the door and waited. An almost inaudible noise of something moving came from the room before falling silent. Then, it was followed by a voice saying, "You may enter." The woman quickly turned the doorknob and entered in a circular room which was much different than the quite bland hallway the woman had come from. Inside, multiple lights of magical blue fire floated at the top of the room, bathing it in an eerie glow. Covering most of the walls of the room were shelves that held arcane tomes or magical items. In the center of the room was a beautiful wooden desk that was covered in multiple arcane symbols. Unfortunately, much of this desk was being covered up by different arcane objects. Towering behind this desk was a macabre exhibit of the assembled bones of a young dragon. The mage had no idea on what type of dragon it was, and she had no wish to ask her guildmaster to answer this. She also had no wish of finding out how Theo had attained such a complete skeleton of said dragon. Yet, even though the dragon's skeleton was very unsettling, it didn't cause as much fear as the guildmaster himself. Sitting at the desk was a man whose attention was closely focused on inspecting the items on the desk. He wore expensive blue robes that would cost a normal farmer an entire year of their pay, yet they seemed to have not been cleaned in quite a while. In fact, the man known as Theoruksha looked like he hadn't slept for the past few days. His green eyes had a madness within them that seemed to be barely contained. He had greasy brown hair that went down to his shoulders and the beginnings of a thin beard. If this was any other person, they'd be seen as a neurotic lunatic that needed to be avoided if not locked up. With Theoruksha, due to being a guildmaster of mages, people wrote his appearance off as being eccentric. The young woman, Mavian, knew that such opinions were being generous. Due to working as Theo's personal assistant for the past 5 months, she'd seen that the man's obsession with magic, and items that contained magic, was very unhealthy. At times, she'd even heard the man talk to magical items as if they were people when he thought he was alone. Yet, these moments of madness that she'd bore witness to didn't deter her from doing her job. Instead, it motivated her to excel at the tasks given to her so that she may be promoted faster and leave Theo's service. For now, she tried to ignore her leader's strangeness and perform her job, and today, this job was quite important. She quickly strode over to the desk and placed the sealed scroll before the unkempt man. "Sir, a message has arrived from one of the arcane explorers this morning," Mavian stated before setting the other documents in her hand to the side of the table for later. Their importance was negligible in the face of the message. The arcane explorers were a subset of the Magician's Guild whose main duty was to explore the land and find places or items of magical importance. Depending on what it was, the explorer would collect the items if they could be moved, or they'd send a message back to their home guild to inform the guildmaster. Typically, The arcane explorers would only send such a message back if they found a place of great power or a powerful relic that was being guarded. It was when Mavian mentioned the arcane explorers that Theo stopped studying whatever items were on his desk and showed interest. He quickly snatched the scroll and broke the seal on it before letting the parchment roll open. Following this, his eyes could be seen flitting back and forth with fervent excitement before smiling. "Mavian, do you know what our explorers have just found?" Theo asked. "No, sir. The message was sealed for your eyes only," Mavian replied, already expecting Theo to tell her. She'd found that the man tended to use other people as sounding boards, with her being no different at the moment. Very recently, a massive structure was seen towering over the trees in the forest of Tob. It wasn't natural and could have only come about through a great act of magic. This means that something of great magical power resides within that forest, Theo stated with a slowly growing manic grin. "Sir, if you're thinking about sending people into the forest, haven't you considered that whatever caused it might be extremely dangerous? For all we know, this could be a person testing an immensely powerful artifact, and they might have great opposition to us collecting said artifact," Mavian explained. She highly doubted that Theo would actually take her advice into consideration because of his obsession with magic. An artifact or place that could conjure massive constructs would belong to the age of the gods. It's an even greater reason to send people to investigate. From the report, the structure appeared like a giant tree of stone. If we found what caused this, and if said cause could create other structures, then it could greatly aid our kingdom. We could even change the course of the constant wars with the Baharuth. If we discovered this cause, then our organization would become the most illustrious in all the kingdom. Theo reasoned as he began pulling out a sheet of parchment and a quill. Mavian already knew that this would be the outcome of the discussion, but she still had to try reasoning with Theo. Whatever caused the structure to appear in the forest was immensely powerful, yet there was too little explanation for what caused it. In Mavian's personal opinion, it'd be better to inform the king about this and hopefully gather a large group of the kingdom's soldiers to aid them in discovering the cause of this phenomenon. But Mavian kept these thoughts to herself. It was better to follow her guildmaster's ideas than to go against them. She'd learned during her time in the guild that she was more likely to be promoted if she didn't argue with her superiors. This was just another one of those situations. "What do you want to do?" the mage asked. "I'm writing a message to the guildmaster of the Adventurers Guild. I'll be asking him to assemble a group of silverplate or higher adventurers that can protect our mages as they travel through the great forest of Tob in 3 days. Theo then finished the note by pulling out a seal and stamping it onto the bottom of the note. "Who'll be going into the forest? It's quite dangerous, especially with the 3 monsters of the forest patrolling it," Mavian questioned. "I'll be one of the members going on this expedition. I also have Seamus, Zeltri, and Craven in mind for the group. But none of you know the forest. Even more, how will you convince enough adventurers to come into the forest with how dangerous it is? I've made the reward for escorting our group is 5 gold each. They'll also receive another 5 if all of our group makes it out of the forest alive." He then rolled the message up and tied a line of string around it to keep it closed. "And to answer your other question, we'll be guided by our resident mage, Mercia. She has great experience in traveling the forest and has even gotten to the Great Lake multiple times." He then held the scroll out to Mavian, who took it with a questioning look. "Take that to the Adventurers Guild. Make sure it makes it to the hands of Pluton Einsack." Mavian was about to run off and follow her superior's orders when he added, "Also, ask Pluton if he can get me a meeting with the woman known as Kasha Blanc, and if possible, I'd like to specifically request for her to be one of the adventurers on the job. From what I've heard, she's shown the ability to cast 3rd-tier spells, and talent like that shouldn't be squandered in the Adventurers Guild. I want to see if she'll join our guild." Mavian became extremely interested at hearing of a 3rd-tier spellcaster. Finding one was an extremely rare event, especially if they were younger than 30 or 40. To date, there were only 3 known 3rd-tier casters in Rantle right now. One would be Theo, which was one of the reasons for why he was made the guildmaster of the city. Another was Zebek, an old librarian of the guild who had no sense of ambition, and the final was Verona Margrost, the head priestess of Four Great Gods Church here in Rantel. With the arrival of another third-tier caster to the city, the factions within the city would be jumping head over heels to recruit this caster into their own group so as to attain higher political standing amongst the other factions. Unfortunately, the fact that this woman was an accomplished mage made forcibly recruiting her into the guild, as is the usual practice for all new magic users, an option that was unavailable to them. Instead, they'd need to have a way to tempt this woman into the guild. The Magicians Guild would need to work fast on this task, because if they knew about a new third-tier magic user in the city, then everyone else was soon to follow. That was if no other faction of the city knew already. Either way they needed to, if not recruit her for themselves, at least make sure that the mayor of Rantel didn't latch his claws into her. It was already difficult enough for the Magicians Guild, let alone the other guilds and factions of the city, to gain any form of leverage over the royal faction without giving them another powerful magic user as an asset. Understood. I'll deliver your request to Einsack now. Giving Theo a quick bow, she immediately left the room to accomplish the tasks assigned to her. She was also more than happy to get away from the man's neurotic presence. Kasha. Nina, with everything that's happened, I think we should let the rest of the guys know about this. I spoke. Currently, the Veyron sisters, Meepo, and I were sitting at a table together on the first floor of the sanctuary in the cabin. Meepo had been kind enough to make tea for us to drink, which I had a sneaking suspicion was made using skills from his alchemist class. What would we tell them? I'm still hesitant to reveal to the others that I'm a Nina began nervously. Don't worry, we won't need to reveal your gender to them. When I said this, Nina quickly relaxed, but I do believe that we should tell them. Especially because with Tyre here, it's not appropriate to make her keep the lie up. Tyre looked at Nina and I with a confused expression. What are you two talking about? Tyre asked. I gave Nina a questioning glance and she returned a defeated nod to me. Tyre, after you were taken, I decided to hide my true gender to protect myself. Because of this, the only people that know I'm a girl are you and Kasha. Not even my friends in the adventuring group that Kasha and I are part of know. Nina explained. A flash of worry filled her eyes, most likely due to what the other guys in our group would think when they heard the truth. From what I've learned while interacting with the rest of the Swords of Darkness, Diane would be quite understanding of the situation and probably just treat Nina as normal. Peter would very likely have reservations about Nina keeping such a large piece of information secret from the rest of the group. It would be a toss-up on whether this would impact the group's dynamic or not. I'd be willing to bet that Peter would try to be mature and keep his opinions on Nina separate whenever we went on a mission. The only one that I'd be hesitant about is Lucrute. The blonde was very emotional and didn't have the type of maturity that Diane and Peter did. In addition, he may view Nina as weaker due to being a girl. Though, that opinion may have been altered due to how powerful I am along with how I've taken Nina under my wing as my apprentice. Regardless, I believe that Lucrute would be the hardest hit when this information was revealed. On a different tangent, I still had no real idea on how I could teach Nina magic unless I used my hid. Wait, I just got an idea. I've been noticing that while the casting of magic hasn't changed from my time in Yggdrasil, the effects certainly have. Would the wish upon a star spell be any different and actually cast a wish that I could word myself or just give me a selection of choices from a pre-generated list? Because, if that was the case, I could use the shooting star ring to test out this hypothesis and wish for the knowledge of how to learn and teach my magic. If I did so, could that allow me to expand my spell list beyond the limits that Yggdrasil imposed? I'll test this out later tonight at Haven Lake since otherwise, the ring would just sit useless on my finger. Since coming here, I'd been making sure to avoid casting spells with costs that I was unsure could be restored. For instance, I didn't know if experience worked here like in the game, especially because I never felt any type of gains when I killed the monsters in the world. Using the ring instead of the wish upon a star spell would mitigate the experience costs while also answering my question. What is it that you wish to do? If you choose to reveal or not reveal your gender to your friends, I'll still support your decision. I'd rather not be the reason for your friends to not like you if I can help it. Tyr asked, pulling me from my thoughts. This isn't nor will it ever be your fault for my friends hating me. It's my fault for hiding the truth from them, and it's something that I've been expecting to happen for some time now, Nina stated with a determined tone. This sudden strength then became buried under doubt as she added, I'm not fully against the idea, but I am scared of what'll happen after I tell the others. Kiddo, look at me, I commanded while the girl's head turned to me. If they are your friends, and I know that they are, then they'll accept you regardless. No matter if you're Nina the boy or Nina the girl, you're still the young determined mage that is part of the Swords of Darkness and a silver plate in the Adventurers Guild. I ruffled Nina's hair after I said this. Really, the only difference now is that they'll know you have boobs. I was pleased to see a smile grow on Nina after I said this. You seem to have a strange habit of cracking jokes when you're trying to be serious. Nina replied as she tried to pat her messy hair back into its normal style. I find it hard to be serious when life is already serious enough. You need a bit of humor spice things up, otherwise the world would be a much duller place. I answered while taking a sip of my tea, but I still need your answer on if you'd like to tell the others about your gender or to leave it hidden. They'll need to know about Tyr after all. Nina was quiet for a few moments as she thought about this. She looked between me and Tyr, as if trying to see what opinions our expressions might give her. Then, finally, she answered, I think that it's time that they know. I've been hiding this from the others for too long, and they deserve to know the truth behind everything now that Tyr's been rescued. I nodded at the answer, and internally, I couldn't help but feel a bit of pride well up at the mature decision the girl had made. Then, I'll go fetch them and bring the guys back here. This is something that should be discussed in private, and there's no place better than the sanctuary. I stood up, and was about to leave, when I stopped and looked at Tyr. Nina had given Tyr her own tunic, leaving herself in only a simple cloth shirt. While the tunic provided the blonde some modesty, it would probably be embarrassing to meet others in just that. Tyr, here's something that I think would make you feel better when meeting new people. After saying this, I cast Create Greater Item, and caused a set of clothing, similar to what I'd seen the girls of this town wear, right onto the table. We'll get you some more clothes later. But for now, that'll do, I said before either girl could begin asking questions. Meepo, make a bit more tea for a few of our guests that will be coming soon. Meepo understands. The kobold answered while I left the cabin and began walking to the exit of this realm. When I arrived at the door, I mentally gave Tyr permissions to open and close the door of the realm, then I exited back into my room at the inn. Instead of just teleporting myself directly to the Adventurers Guild, I decided to walk there for once. I had two reasons for this. The first reason was that I'm normally highly noticeable, and me walking back to the inn without having exited it with 3 people in tow would be very odd and suspicious. The other reason was because I wanted to give Tyr a bit of time to get dressed and clean herself up without having to rush. Giving my room a quick inspection, I was satisfied to note that it didn't look too messy. The only things that prevent my room from having a pristine appearance was the unmade bed, the plates from the breakfast that the Veyron sisters and I had earlier, and the maps with a few bags of coins holding down the edges on my table. Following this, I gathered the used plates together and then left the room while closing the door behind me. Then, I made my way to the bar where I could hear a larger amount of people had now arrived. To tell the truth, back in my world, the bars I went to were usually all packed with drunks and had terrible appearances due to chronic bar fights, vomiting, and chemicals that got into the bar by clinging onto the patrons coming from outside. The only good bars that were actually clean and devoid of the extreme alcoholics were for the rich and well-to-do, and that was because those bars could afford to hire bouncers and decent cleaners while the others couldn't. It was a bit odd to get used to how much cleaner the bars and inns were. Odder still, that the air was breathable without a filtering device. When it came down to it, The most valuable thing that anyone could have owned on Earth was a filtration device to breathe outside. I'd seen people get mugged on the street for a cheap, low-end respirator because they were necessary to survive if you didn't have a house with a filtering system. Sure, one could go without a filtering device, but they'd only go a week before the toxins and pollutants in the air irreversibly damaged their lungs. After 2 weeks, you'd be lucky to not die from choking on your own blood and mucus as it filled your lungs. 3 weeks, you'd be getting buried, cremated, or eaten depending on where you died and if you had anyone that could even afford to bury you. Typically, only the rich could afford the money for a coffin and a burial spot. Everyone else would be taken to an incinerator that was owned by the Traven Corporation. They made their money off the US through a mandatory tax of our paychecks that went to them. Those 2 options were considered lucky. If no one picked up your body in time, then it'd be taken away by the poor or homeless to be eaten. I really wish that I'd never have to go back there, since a week of living in this livable new world felt like an eternity from my toxic old world. After arriving at the bar, I set the used dishes onto the counter in front of Morgan. "Here's your dishes, the food was great." I wasn't lying about the compliment, it was leagues better than the nutrient paste that I usually had to eat. "You're the only person that's ever said that about my cooking. What sort of foul shit must you have eaten to consider giving my food a compliment?" The man joked as he took the dishes off the counter and set them next to a metal tub with water and rags in it. I've traveled for a long time. Most of the time, the rations I had tasted awful. Add in that I'm a terrible cook, and you'll understand why I find your food to be so much better than what I usually have. "I hope that doesn't ruin the compliment," I answered with an amused laugh. Morgan shook his head with a smile. "Nah, it doesn't ruin the compliment. I still remember when I had to eat rations as a soldier, so to hear that my cooking is better than the pig shit that they fed us makes me feel happy that I'm not so bad a cook." He then grabbed a clean mug and filled it with some frothy ale before handing it over to me. "What's this for?" I asked as I took the mug in hand. "Consider it a thanks from me. You're one of the only people to compliment my cooking here, so this is my appreciation for that. In addition, rumor has it that you're a strong mage, so it would be a good idea to get into your good graces now if I ever need your help in the future." I raised an eyebrow at this as I quickly began to chug the offered drink down. I think that I even managed to surprise Morgan with the speed at which I finished the beverage before slamming the wooden mug down onto counter. "I'll have to keep that remark in mind for the future," I replied as I wiped the lingering foam of the ale from my mouth. "I'll be back in a bit and you should probably try to pick your jaw up from the floor," I added before turning around and walking out the door. Arriving to the guild took only 15 minutes, yet I was slowed down when I noticed a sizable group of people entering the building. My curiosity was piqued at what manner of event was occurring inside to gather this type of crowd. Still, I needed to get inside to meet with the others, so I could probably find out about what was happening when I got inside. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, as it were. It wasn't that difficult to make my way inside, since by the time I had made it to the entrance of the guild, most of the initial crowd had finally made it inside, so that didn't slow me. The only annoyance that I truly faced was the stench coming from all these people being shoved together into one building. It was extremely obvious to tell who hadn't bathed themselves or cleaned their gear. Easier still to tell who had just arrived from a job. Yet, I tried to break past this as I sniffed the air for the scent of my friends among the crowd. Luckily, I didn't need to when I hear a voice from the 2nd floor called down to me. "Hey, Kasha, we're up here." The voice of Lucrute rang out. My ears quickly pinpointed the exact direction from where the voice came, and my eyes quickly met with Lucrute's brown orbs. I gave him a nod and pushed through the throngs of people and up the stairs to a space that the Swords of Darkness had claimed for themselves. When I arrived, I joined up next to Lucrute, leaning against the railing of the 2nd floor. Across from us, Peter and Dine gave me a welcoming grin. That was when I asked, "Can anyone explain why there are so many people here today?" "I'm surprised that you didn't hear. Our guildmaster, Pluton Einsack, announced to the guild that the Magicians Guild has made a request for silver plate or higher adventurers to escort them through the great forest of Tob. Lucrute answered excitedly. What's so special about that? I asked. This fuss couldn't just be due to the Magicians Guild making a request, there had to be something more. This was the point when Peter answered, it's because they are offering 5 gold coins to each adventurer that takes on this job, and 5 more if all the mages come back alive. The amount of money that they are offering could feed a man for an entire year or pay for high-quality equipment. That makes me even more curious as to why they are offering such a high payment to silverplate adventurers, no offense. It's just that something about this job seems a bit suspicious. While your hesitation is understandable, there is a reason for their choice of price and adventurer rank, Dine said sagely. Normally, paying gold plates for a simple escort mission is worth 10 to 15 golds since there are other jobs available that pay more and require less effort. For traversing a place like the Forest of Tob, that price would likely rise up to 15 to 20 gold. The large man then walked over to Lucrute and I and pointed down to the growing crowd of silverplate adventurers. A job like what is being offered now is called a pyrite mission. They offer a job that's high pay to silver plates and low pay to gold plates. This type of scheme attracts more interest and workers for a fraction of the price it would cost for a group of gold plates. I couldn't help but feel a bit of pity for the unready adventurers that would attempt this mission. There was likely a sizable number of adventurers here that absolutely needed this money but would likely die or become horribly injured for trying. How often does this happen? And why hire a bunch of weaker people instead of a group that's stronger? Quite a bit, especially if it's from lesser nobles. In comparison, hiring out a group of 10 silverplate adventurers for 5 gold on this job costs much less than hiring a group of 5 goldplate adventurers for 20. In a cynical way, it's even better because the group of silverplates are more likely to lose a few members, which means that they'll save on gold. Dine seemed to give a tired sigh after this. The guild allows such practices to happen since they still receive a commission from whoever offers the job, and it tends to weed out the weaker or greedier adventurers. Dine let out a humorless chuckle as he said this. It's brilliant, really. When too many adventurers start filling the guild, more pyrite missions are given out to thin the herd, freeing up more missions for copper and silver plates to take. This also has the added benefit of keeping the number of higher-ranking adventurers low. Upon hearing this, my gaze looked between Lucrute and Peter. Have any of you ever taken a pyrite mission? Peter and Lucrute quickly looked away with guilt and embarrassment. Wait, both of you have done obvious suicide missions before? I asked in shock. It's really not as bad as you think, Kasha. Lucrute began with an apologetic tone. I've done one pyrite mission before when I was much more inexperienced. Missions like these are a coin flip on if they are risky or not. The one I took was to guard a noble's hunting party. Nothing happened and I actually got to make some extra gold when I hunted a boar for a lazy night. I wasn't as lucky, Peter stated. I've only took 2 pyrites during my career. One was uneventful like Lucrute's, and I got to make a few connections with knights and a countess, while the other almost killed me. I've still got a scar near my heart when an assassin got in a lucky blow. I wish that I could look serious by crossing my arms and giving the pair of idiots a disappointed look. Unfortunately, my boobs were too large to allow my arms to do that unless I crossed my arms under or over them, which would severely hinder said serious appearance. Instead, I had to put them on my hips and give the two a stern gaze. While I'm here, I severely hope that the pair of you don't do anything stupidly dangerous like that unless I'm there to make sure that you can't get yourselves killed, understand? I didn't know what was stranger, the nervous submission that filled the air around us, or that I was acting like a concerned mother. Your concern is appreciated, but I have no wish to die until I'm old and fat, not from dying young on a job. I'm very careful about which jobs I pick out for us to do since enough adventuring groups die because they chose jobs above their skill level. Peter answered. I'm happy to note that his answer was something that I expected, as he was mature enough to know his limits. I wouldn't be worried about the jobs that all the others took because I knew that they'd be safe as long as I was there to bail them out of any potential trouble. It was what occurred next that I didn't expect. In a moment, Lucrute grabbed both of my hands and held them together in his while his face moved until it was only a few centimeters away from mine. I could feel a blush begin to grow on my face, partially from embarrassment and partially for some reason that I couldn't explain. My beautiful sorceress, I have complete faith that you'll be there to protect me. I only ask that you honor me with your trust to keep you safe as well. If this was a romance movie, I'm pretty sure that Lucrute would have kissed me at this point. Though, he did seem tempted to do so. In addition, from this close, I found myself surprised that I'd never noticed how hawk-like his eyes were, which gave him a bit of an exotic and predatory vibe. It's kind of a bit attractive. Hearing this thought immediately gave me pause. Why did I just think that? For a while now, I've been worried about my new body was changing my mind. While being able to vent to my clone last night helped push these worries down, hearing this echo from my own mind frightened me. What was happening to me, and should I even fight against these new thoughts or accept them? My expression must have given something away as Lucrute's eyes became filled with concern. Kasha, are you okay? Was it something I said? The blonde archer asked. Quickly hiding the worry on my face, I gave Lucrute a smile. No, it's nothing to do with what you said. Your words were actually quite sweet even if unneeded, since I've already placed my trust in you to be there in my time of need. Upon saying this, Lucrute looked like he was about to hit cloud 9. I was simply thinking about something else at the moment, which also reminded me that I came to the guild today for quite a different reason than a job. It actually involves Nina. When I gave mention of Nina's name, all three of my teammates became very interested. What about Nina? Did something bad happen? Peter asked quickly. No, it wasn't anything bad. In fact, something amazing happened yesterday. I'll let Nina explain if you're all willing to follow me. I answered, giving relief to the trio of worried adventurers before me. In addition, you'll also get to see some interesting things today, so keep those feelings of awe in the back of your minds. Of course, we'll follow you. Just lead the way to Nina. Peter answered for the group. With this, I was about to walk away when I was stopped because Lucrute's hands were still entwined into mine. I gave him a questioning glance, and he replied with a shy grin and a guilty look. Seems like the man still wanted to hold my hands, though I'll give him credit for the attempt as he only failed because I was able to notice. With a roll of my eyes, I gave the man a mischievous grin before freeing up one of my hands and gently squeezing his hand with my other. The look of surprise on the archer's face was hilariously adorable as I lead him after me through the crowd of adventurers and out of the guild. Even without my enhanced hearing, I would have been able to hear the snickering coming from Peter and Dine as they followed after us. Eventually, the four of us exited the building and arrived onto the street and started to head off to the hero's respite. The entire way, Lucrute and I walked hand in hand, and the blonde archer looked so giddy as we did. It was from behind us that I managed to pick up on a conversation between Peter and Dine. 2 Silver says that Lucrute won't say any coherent sentence when we get to Nina. Peter bet in amusement with a jingle of coins. I'll take those odds. Double says that he'll end up embarrassing himself while we're talking with Nina. Dine retorted. Agreed. Then Peter added, ever wonder if all the women in Kasha's land wear clothing similar to hers? I mean, the exposure of her hips is very flattering, just makes me wish that more women dressed like that. You realize that Lucrute has interest in her along with her being a friend and teammate of ours? Dine remarked in amusement. I know, I'm just wondering about her clothing and culture. Besides, there's the girl that works at the guild who I've got my eye on. Wait, Peter has interest in a girl? That's very interesting. Is it the red-haired secretary that works at the front desk? Her name's Helena, right? Yeah. We've talked quite often and I think that she's into me since she's personally given me some good job requests that were easy and paid well. She's the reason that we were able to get that estate job 2 weeks ago. Dine hummed with interest. I thought that it was strange that we snagged that job before anyone else could. The reward would have assured that it'd have been gone before we arrived at the guild that morning. If she's showing such an obvious interest in you, why haven't you done anything about it? I just don't know how to ask her. It doesn't seem appropriate to ask her while she's working, yet she also is gone by the time that we typically arrive back to the guild after a job. In addition, I'm skilled with fighting and leading, not romancing women. That's Lucrute's specialty, though his history with women doesn't give credence to said skill. He's managed to earn Cash's interest, but I attribute that more to Cash's playful nature than to Lucrute's romance skills. Diane was correct on that account. Teasing Lucrute was becoming a favored pastime of mine, but there were qualities of the man that were attractive. Now, there's an easy way to get a moment to talk with Helena if you're open to try it. Well, Peter asked quickly with desperation, don't keep it a secret, I'm willing to try almost anything at this point. There's only so long that Helena is going to wait before losing interest. Fine, the bearded man relented with a chuckle. What you need to do is either ask Helena to wait for you after work or decline a job for a day so that you can wait for Helena to finish work. It's pretty simple and I'm surprised that you haven't figured it out. Really, it's that simple. Of course. An even easier way to ask her out is to just ask her while she's working. Keep in mind that when a woman likes a man, a good way to ensure that their interest remains is when the man actually gathers up the courage to ask them out instead of remaining passive. I could hear Diane patting Peter on the shoulder after saying this. I'll try. Though I can't help but wonder where in the hell you managed to learn how to romance women. Just remember, before we met, I used to travel to many villages, and while I was a teenager I mastered the ability to talk to women for private encounters. I grew out of it a few years later, but I'm not too out of practice to still remember how to be romantic. Well. It appears that there's more behind the large, sagely, druid than meets the eye. I'll have to ask more about Diane's past on a later date. I'll see what I can do tomorrow. I'll definitely try to ask her tomorrow. The swordsman said with determination. I'd have to keep my eyes out for Peter's attempt, as well as the potential embarrassment that may follow. When we arrived at the inn, I stopped holding Lucrute's hand, much to his audible disappointment. Yet, it still didn't prevent the archer from dogging after me like a puppy. In addition, Peter spoke up after this occurred. Hey, Lucrute, how are you doing right now? I'm fine. Peter and Diane shared a conspiratorial look with one another as they tried to contain their smirks at the archer's dazed speech pattern. As much as I wanted to continue watching Peter and Diane mess with Lucrute, Nina and Tyr had been waiting long enough for us. With a sad heart, I broke up the interaction between the three. Okay, we can continue teasing Lucrute later. We can't stall showing Nina our amazing presence any longer. Now, come on. Saying this, I pulled open the door to the inn and stepped inside as the others followed me. The first thing I noticed was Morgan giving me an acknowledging nod before returning to his usual activity of cleaning tankards and mugs. How spotless did those things need to be before the man would consider them free of all contamination? At this rate, it seemed like he cleaned those things, not out of an obligation to keep a healthy establishment, but instead as an ingrained muscle response. If that cup was missing from his hands, would he continue to mime out the action? I could already tell that this would bother me until I finally tried to test this theory out. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. You know, I've been to this place a few times, Peter remarked, yet I've never seen this many people in here before. Did it get very popular recently? I couldn't exactly answer that question since I've only been living in the inn for a few days. Though, I did spot that people had been coming more often nevertheless. I just assumed that it was due to business picking up throughout the week. It was when people started giving me attention that I wished for us to hurry the party to my room. While the attention was fun, it came to a head when I felt someone grope my ass. Almost instinctually, one of my hidden tails wrapped itself around the wrist of the offending hand. Did your mother never teach you manners in how to properly treat a lady? I asked as the pervert tried to pull his hand away, yet my tail was too strong for him to pull against. What the hell? He whispered in surprise. Following this, I had my tail squeeze around the wrist like a python, not hard enough to break the bones in the wrist, but hard enough to cause a bit of pain. I then turned to look at the nervous-looking young man who, Even now, I could smell his inebriated condition from his breath. Adding to this effect, I mustered an illusion to cause my eyes to lightly glow. This additional effect did an adequate job in scaring the piss out of the pervert. I've not given you permission to grope me. This is your only warning, do so again and I'll be keeping this hand that you seem to want to give to me. Are we clear? For emphasis, I applied a little more pressure on the wrist, which earned a wince of pain on the pervert's features. Why yes, ma'am. You understood. I finally freed my grip on the pervert's wrist. That said, my teammates gave me impressed looks, while other patrons who may have had similar ideas as the pervert quickly looked away from me as if I wouldn't notice them. Good thing that Lucrute isn't that stupid. Peter commented. Huh? What? Said Archer asked while still retaining the dazed tone of before. Nothing, Lucrute, nothing at all. Following this display of camaraderie, we hastily traveled through the crowd and out of the tavern and into the hallway of the inn. Upon arriving at the door to my room, I pulled it open and ushered the trio inside. When the three made it inside, I followed after them and shut the door behind me. The trio looked around the room in confusion due to the area being empty of anyone besides us. Surprisingly, it was Lucrute that spoke first after finally coming down from his trip in Cloud 9. Where is Nina? This place seems completely empty, unless she's hiding in that closet next to us. I found it amusing that calling my sanctuary a closet was an extremely apt description of how I treated it. Even more amusing was the groan of disappointment that came from Peter as he handed off a pair of coins to Dine. You're more correct than you think, Lucky. I answered with the Archer's nickname as I gave the trio permissions to open the door. Why don't you take a look inside? Confused but also curious, Lucrute followed my advice and pulled open the door. It was a moment later when I wished that I had some form of camera to take a picture of the looks of shock and awe that my friends had upon seeing the massive interior garden of the sanctuary. Is that real? Lucrute asked as he tentatively reached a hand through the doorway, as if expecting that he'd feel the canvas of a painting. Walking past the three slack-jawed men, I said while stepping foot into the sanctuary, this is completely real. It's from a spell that I'm able to cast that creates a pocket realm. I'll explain more behind the context of it later, but for now, Nina's been waiting inside long enough. I continued walking towards the cabin in the center of the garden, yet I could still feel the doubt radiating off the trio. It wasn't until Dine spoke that the group became a bit calmer. I may not know that much about the magic that conjured this, but I can feel that all the plants inside are real and alive. With confidence in his steps, the large druid entered my realm and followed. After Dine, Peter and Lucrute accompanied the large man and entered the realm while inspecting the realm with awe. Hurry up, slowpokes. I called after them, pulling their attentions back to me as they hurried their pace. In no time at all, we arrived before the cabin and I opened the door and went inside. The sight that the four of us were greeted to was Nina sitting at the table with a now-dressed Tyr as the pair drank tea. Aside from them, Meepo stood upon a stool next to the oven as he worked on his batch of tea in the kettle. Hey everyone, it's good to see you all. Nina greeted happily as the four of us went inside. While I went to take a seat at the table, the other three just continued to stand near the cabin's entrance as they didn't fully know what to do, seeing as this entire place was a bit out of their depth to comprehend. When did you learn about this place, Nina? It seems so unreal. Peter asked sheepishly. Yesterday. Kasha showed it to me because of why I needed to meet with you guys today. The mage answered as she took a sip of tea. Although, as Dine and Peter's eyes were focused on Nina, Lucrute had taken the time to investigate the room along with Meepo and Tyr. Before you explain that, could you also tell us who the other girl and the kobold are? The Archer asked with great curiosity. Actually, she is why you're here, Nina answered as she motioned to Tyr. The blonde girl started to become a bit nervous at all the attention she was receiving, yet she did an admirable job in hiding her feelings from the others. I'd like to introduce all of you to my older sister, Nina Veyron. What? The trio of males shouted together. But your sister was taken. How did you find her? Did she escape? How did she find you if she did? What? As much as the questions were understandable, we wouldn't get anywhere with the motor mouth of Lucrutz. I can explain that part. I interrupted. Until yesterday, Tyre had indeed been enslaved to a former group of horrid people. Using a tracking spell, I located Tyre and teleported with Nina to her location. After healing Tyre and sending her and Nina back to my room at the inn, I made sure to destroy the establishment and all the monsters inside. Even now, I found it hard to even call the things who visited and knowingly worked at that brothel as anything close to human. Regardless, I tried to keep the explanation in an abridged form, especially because no one needed to know what happened to the poor girl. Wait, Kasia, Peter said as his mind tried to compartmentalize all this information. You're telling us that you managed to find Nina's sister in just a day? She did. I could hardly believe it even while witnessing everything with my own eyes. Nina chimed in. Peter just sighed while rubbing his temple, as if in the vain hope that this would be the most shocking thing he learned today. Would you guys like to sit down? This'll probably be a long explanation and it'd be easier if you were sitting. Can't keep standing forever. Dine chimed in. Besides, I'd enjoy a cup of tea since it smells delicious from over here. Soon after, the large druid joined the sisters and I at the table. Meepo, mind preparing a few cups for us? I politely asked. Certainly, mistress. Meepos kept the tea at a perfect temperature in preparation for your return. With greater strength than his small body portrayed, the kobold lifted the metal kettle of tea from the stove along with some cups that were hung from the horns on his head and hopped down from the stool he was standing on. Then, he dragged the stool with him across the floor and to the table before hopping up onto it and then onto the table. As he waddled over to dine, Meepo removed a cup that was hanging off one of his horns and poured tea into it before handing it to dine. I'm quite surprised at seeing a well-mannered kobold. Typically, they are quite violent and limited in their intelligence aside from making traps. Dine remarked as he began to sip from the cup. Meepo Breepo be Meepo's name. Meepo is a great craftsman who's been honored to employ his abilities in service to the mistress. Meepo would never tarnish the Great One's presence by acting like a savage kobold. The little kobold said with immense pride. If Meepo was much taller, and his voice didn't sound so squeaky, it'd actually be quite an impressive display. Unfortunately, that display of devotion was just adorable. I see. No doubt, the story behind how you and Kasia met will prove to be quite fascinating. You'll have to tell us later. Dine replied politely, the tea you made is also quite delicious. All the while that Dine had been conversing with Meepo, Peter and Lucrut had managed to quietly pull up a pair of chairs to the table which they sat in. Meepo, ever attentive, poured tea into a pair of cups that he handed off to the pair of fighters. It was at this point that Peter stopped holding his expression of chronic confusion since arriving in my realm, and instead he looked at Tyre with a smile. Sorry if we're being impolite. All of us are still just trying to process everything that we're seeing right now. The swordsman apologized sheepishly. My name's Peter Mauk and I'm the unofficial leader of our group. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tyre. Greetings, I'm Dine Woodwonder. Just an average druid. I wanted to call bullshit about that remark, but I held my opinion to myself. And lastly is me, Lucrut Volve, archer and world-renowned master of romance. Yeah right, Peter interrupted, I have yet to see the famous skill set that you supposedly have. Lucrut glared at Peter. For your information, that's because my large heart, and all the love that it contains, has been captured by another. My days of seducing the hearts of lovely maidens everywhere has ended now that I've found the love of my life. The cringeworthy sappiness of Lucrut's declaration made me want to melt in my chair in embarrassment. That doesn't explain your previous month of getting rejected by all the girls you asked out. Peter retorted. Fate simply wished for me to hold my love for when Kasia arrived in Rantel. Two things occurred when Lucrut said this. The first was that Tyre looked at me with the scary look of a matchmaker. I didn't think that anything could cause me to shiver in fear until I saw the look in her eyes. The second was that Meepo pulled out a metal rod with a jewel at the tip which he pointed at Lucrute's face. "Are you saying that you are courting the mistress? Tell Meepo if you've ever sullied the mistress' honor." The kobold demanded like he was an overprotective father. Lucrute cried out in surprise before raising his hands above his head in surrender. "Yes, I'm courting Kasha. I promise that I've not done anything to sully her honor, far from it, I'd never do something like that. Just don't kill me." The archer quickly replied to the slowly glowing jewel in his face. Meepo looked over to me for confirmation. As amusing as this turn of events was, I needed to break it up before Meepo maimed or killed Lucrute. He's telling the truth. Lucrute's been quite the gentleman and would never attempt to sully my honor. He also has my permission to attempt to court me. You can let him go. My words swayed Meepo as he slowly lowered the wand from Lucrute's face and shoved it back into a hiding place in his robe. Meepo will accept the mistress' words, but he's not finished with his discussion with the lusty human stick shooter. I almost spat out the tea that I was drinking when I heard Lucrute's new title. Peter had no such qualms as he started laughing his ass off at Lucrute's expense. "Meepo's got his eyes on you." The kobold then gave Lucrute the "I'm watching you" gesture with his hand as he hopped off the table and back onto his stool. From then on, the kobold's attention never broke from watching every single movement of the archer. Following this, I spotted Peter reach into his pocket and pull out 4 silver coins from his pocket before sliding them over to the triumphant Dine. Attempting to get a handle on the meeting before something else ended up distracting us, I said, "Spontaneous outburst aside, the next part of the discussion is the plan for the group going forwards." "What do you mean by that?" Lucrute's voice dipped a bit when his eyes spotted Meepo threatening him by poking the glowing head of his wand out from the dark recesses of his robe. "While Tyre has been rescued, she doesn't have a job and Nina's room at the inn she's staying at can't fit them both. Nina and I discussed this earlier, as neither she nor Tyre want to live separately, and the solution I came up with is that they'll live in my sanctuary realm. It's got a lot of space and it'll free up money for Nina to use elsewhere," I explained. "So, it's actually possible to live in this place," Dine said to himself. "I'm not the most knowledgeable about magic of this area, but wouldn't keeping a realm like this use up a lot of mana from the caster?" "No, the only cost is what I used to initially create this pocket realm. It will sustain itself permanently while also holding a lot of space within it. That's the reason that it's a perfect place for Nina and Tyre to stay for as long as they'd like." "How else could we help out?" "We're all willing to take a cut of job pay if it'll help out Tyre," Peter stated while the others nodded in agreement. "Actually, if Tyre is interested in a job, I could ask my cousin if she has an opening in her restaurant. She's always interested in getting more servers to work at her place since the place can get pretty packed without enough staff," Lucrute remarked, which wasn't that bad of an idea, now that I think about it. Tyre probably needed to train up her social skills and being a waitress was a good way of doing so. "Tyre, would that interest you?" I asked the blonde girl. "It's your decision, so you don't have to say yes if you don't want to." Tyre gave the idea some thought before nodding her head. "I'd like to try it. I can't stay away from the world forever and I'd like to aid you and Nina. I'll feel like a burden if I'm not able to help out." A respectable answer on Tyre's end. "Then it's settled. After we finish up, I'll go talk to my cousin and see what she can do," Lucrute stated with a confident tone. It looks like everything was working out. If Lucrute's unable to get a job from Selly, then I can always have Tyre help out Meepo in selling excess potions and items that are stored here. Great. "Will Nina need any help moving her things out of the other inn?" Peter inquired while sipping his cup. "Kasha will be helping me, so it's covered. But that isn't the only thing I wanted to tell you guys." Nina trailed off nervously as she considered her next words. "What is it, Nina? You kind of stopped telling us," Lucrute asked. The conflict of what Nina wanted to say caused creases to form on her brow. "Guys, I consider all of you my best friends, and because you're my friends, it's been extremely hard to keep a secret of mine from all of you. Please, promise you won't be angry with me for what I tell you next," because I couldn't bear to lose any of you over something like this." The begging in Nina's voice was full of desperation and fear of rejection. I just hoped that Nina understood that even if the others rejected her, which I could bet my life wouldn't happen, I would still be there to help her out. "Nina, I promise, we won't be angry with you," Diane reassured the girl with that sagely tone of his. "Just tell us what it is that's troubling you so much. We're always here to help you if you want it." The young mage let out a deep breath and gave a wavering smile. "Tyre is my sister. And I'm her sister as well." Diane was the first to pick up on what Nina admitted, and strangely enough, he looked like this reveal wasn't all that new. Instead, he gave her a proud, knowing smile. It was a second later when Peter's eyes finally widened in surprise until he finally settled to chuckling. "Wait. You're actually a girl?" Lucrute shouted in realization and amazement as he started inspecting the girl, then comparing her between Tyre and myself. "But, how, what, I'm just..." Looks like we broke Lucrute again. "Also, here's a silver IOU. Following this, Peter flipped a coin into the archer's lap. Yet, Lucrute was so deep in thought that he didn't even register the money. His eyes looked like they were focusing on a ball in a tennis match with how often they'd go back and forth. Mind explaining that?" I asked. "It's just a running bet that Lucrute and I have. If we recruit a guy into the group, I get a silver, and if we get a girl, then Lucrute gets a silver." Peter then looked at Nina in mock anger. "Damn it, Nina, I'm losing so much money today because of you." He then burst out into laughter which helped lighten the mood at the table. "Why, you're okay with me being a girl?" Nina asked hesitantly. "Of course we are, Nina, though I believe that Lucrute's re-evaluating his life at the moment, so we can just ignore him at the moment. You're our friend, which is something that hasn't changed. It does explain a few things, like how you never roomed with us when the offer was available. You always wore baggy clothes that obscured your body shape," Diane remarked. Surprisingly, and of course it would be now when Lucrute would come out of his existential mini-coma, the archer added, "You also never swam in the rivers or ponds we stopped by when we would. Welcome back to the land of the living, Lucky. How was the nap?" I teased. "Ha ha, very funny." Lucrute answered sarcastically, "This is a large fireball that you've dropped on us, but I can understand why you did it, since dressing like a man is less likely to get you attacked on the road than a woman." That was surprisingly mature for Lucrute. Did he get replaced by a shapeshifter while we weren't looking? I just can't help but ask why you didn't tell us sooner. You didn't have to hide that from us. Nina looked away sheepishly when given the question. "I'm not really sure. I have been hiding my gender for so long that it just seemed normal. And after I became friends with all of you, I was afraid that you would all hate me and kick me out of the group." Lucrute got up from his chair and walked around the table. As he did, Meepo had his hand inside his robe like he had a gun hidden inside. Finally, Lucrute grabbed Nina in a headlock and started to playfully give the girl a noogie, much to her protests. "Come on. Stop it, Lucrute." "Nah, Squirt. I've gotta pay you back for keeping things from us," Lucrute responded while laughing. I gave an unladylike snort at the display and leaned back into my chair. "Girl or not, I'll still treat you like before because you're still the Nina I've gotten to know." He then temporarily stopped giving the girl a noogie and added, "Besides, if you left, then I would lose the little sibling that I love to mess with." Nina's eyes widened at hearing the archer's declaration. "Wait, you think of me as a sibling?" "Of course I do, Squirt." Following this, he resumed the noogie while Nina complained and tried to hold his hand still. Lucrute broke the headlock and instead wrapped his arm across Nina's chest to keep her arms pinned down, all the while laughing like a loon. Diane and Peter both laughed at the display before they got out of their seats and came over to Lucrute and Nina before tackling them both. For the next few minutes, an impromptu wrestling match broke out among the four while Tyre and I sat back and watched the event. Then, the sound of "Yee!" and Meepo jumped into the pile of wrestling adventurers, and more specifically, at Lucrute. You know, I'm glad that Nina has such good friends that took care of her when I couldn't. It's good to see that she wasn't alone all this time, Taya remarked with a hint of disappointment in her voice. It was easy to tell that Taya was upset that she wasn't there for Nina, and possibly a bit jealous of the bond that the young mage had made with her friends. I gave the girl a reassuring pat on the shoulder as we watched on. Just because you weren't there for a few years in Nina's life doesn't mean that you can't be there for the rest. Life has its ups and downs, and while you lived the last few years at rock bottom, the only place you can go now is up. Taya looked at me with a gaze akin to recognition. It's easy to see why Nina feels so comfortable around you. You remind me of our mom. She had blonde hair like yours and she always could say something that cheered us up. I felt a blush growing on my face at the compliment. But it was also followed by a mixture of happiness and dread. I liked the idea of being a mom, yet I was scared at how easily I enjoyed being called a mom instead of a dad. I'm honored that you'd think of me like that, Taya. I'll do my best to respect the memory of your mother. I promised, which I had no intention of breaking. You don't need to go that far. Just keep being you, that's all I could ask, and it's all that Nina needs. Then, I promised to do my best. Thank you, Zarisu. Awakening this morning was quite an experience for me. For starters, I had found myself covered in sticky saliva as my Hydra, Rororo, had felt that I'd been sleeping for too long. It was a surprise to find all of Rororo's heads licking me awake, especially because Hydra saliva had a lingering smell that took some time to wash off. Really? I groaned out as I pushed the excited heads of the Hydra away from me. Unfortunately, he continued to lather me in his saliva until I actually sat up from my bed. Rororo, I'm up already. After a bit more licking, Rororo finally seemed satisfied by my lucidity and pulled his heads out from the opening that connected my house and Rororo's living quarters to one another. It was still odd to consider that this large building was my house. I had been used to living in a simple wooden shack, and in comparison, this house was like a rich mansion. It had been created by Kasha using her magic to command the very ground itself to form this building. There were 4 rooms in this house, with my bedroom, a main room, a kitchen, and a guest room. Connected to my room was a small building that acted as Rororo's hut. In addition, my new home had been built right next to the lake. I found this to be immensely convenient since I was able to create my fishery right next to my house. Speaking of the fishery, with Kasha's aid, I was able to have a fishery created inside a building that mitigated many of the flaws my original fishery had. One of the largest flaws of my original fishery was that predators, like birds or bears, could easily steal fish since the netting could be torn and the lack of a roof allowed birds access to the trapped fish. The design that Kasha implemented was quite intriguing since from an outside perspective, the fishery appeared to be a long stone building that had been built on a pier over the lake. Yet, underneath the building, fencing made of stone and metal was molded between each support pillar that kept the fishery above the water and contained the fish within the building. Currently, 50 fish resided within the fishery and a few of them had already mated with one another. I felt very excited since I could easily see my tribe being fed for an entire year without Kasha's magic, with 4 more of these fisheries constructed and running. The only downside that I could see currently was when winter came, and it was something I still had to work out, but I figured that if we created a stockpile of fish and had Kasha use her enlarging magic upon them, then the issue would become a moot point. My fishery aside, I had also been immensely interested in watching this settlement grow and advance. Before coming here, if I'd been told that goblins could farm, then I'd have laughed the idea off as completely absurd. This had been changed after seeing the fields that the goblins had been seeding. Even more incredulous were the ogres and trolls that were being civil and putting their strength to use, either by acting as guards for the settlement or by aiding the goblins with farming. I even saw a few constructing buildings. With supervision. With a stretch, I stood up from my bed and traversed through my house until I arrived at my kitchen. I wasn't fully attuned to the idea of a stove as I was used to cooking food over a fire, but I was finding myself growing to the idea of a salting barrel that had been very useful in preserving the fish that I caught 2 days ago. In my village, salt was hard to acquire and would normally be used on only the largest fish to preserve them for later seasons. Here, though, I had an easy-to-access barrel filled with salt, which would have been like owning a barrel of gold back in my village. This was a luxury that I enjoyed using, especially because I had learned after exploring the village that there were many houses with salting barrels for the inhabitants. I could only assume that Kasha had used her magic to create it, as I had no clue otherwise as to how she may have acquired such an amount of salt. Opening the lid of the barrel, I pulled out a fish for myself and 3 for Rororo. Then, I closed the barrel and took the fish with me as I left my house and shut the door behind me. It was outside here that I was greeted to an excitable Hydra waiting for me out the door. I couldn't help but smirk as I tossed 3 of the fish to Rororo and watched as his heads darted and competed with one another to eat each the fish. Hungry today, aren't you? Well, you don't need to fight for the food, it's all going to the same stomach. I remarked as I started taking bites out of my breakfast. While eating, I left Rororo to his breakfast and walked to the fishery building for the daily inspection. When I arrived at the fishery, I opened the door and entered a room lit by lamps that contained magical fire that wouldn't go out. The room itself was mostly a pool with walkways on the edges of the room. Typically, my daily inspection of the fishery involved checking if the fencing was intact, whether there were any fish that had died, and if they had a healthy appearance. Looking in the water, I couldn't see any corpses floating in the water or skeletons that had sunk to the bottom. In addition, all of the fish had a healthy shade of color. Feeling satisfied with how the fish looked, I walked to a barrel in the corner of the room and popped it open. Inside was a mixture of grain and corn, which I scooped out with my hand and scattered into the water and watched as the once calm movements of fish in the water became fast and erratic as they rushed to eat the grain and corn. I did this a few more times until I felt that there was enough food floating about the water before I closed the barrel and left the fishery. Completing this daily ritual, I finally walked to the edge of the fishery and jumped into the lake water. Swimming in the water, I began to clean off all the saliva, and the smell that came with it, from my body, which took some time. I still haven't been able to discover anything that made cleaning off Hydra saliva any easier. While washing myself, I spotted Rororo from the corner of my vision trotting over to me. I really hoped that Rororo didn't get it into his head to start licking me again, else my efforts to clean myself would become useless. Disappointingly, the Hydra seemed very playful today as he charged into the water, which created a large splash. "Okay, you can calm down, big guy," I told the excited Hydra as he snaked one of his heads between my legs and lifted me up from the water. "While I know you want to play, it's kind of interfering with my ability to clean the mess you covered me in," I said with a laugh and patted Rororo's heads as they pressed themselves against my body for attention. "Rororo, you are so greedy for my attention. If someone else saw this, they might almost think that I ignore you all the time." Saying this, I pointed to the shore, which caused Rororo to start walking us out of the water. People might think that hydras aren't that smart due to how often their heads can fight with one another, but they tend to forget that hydras have more than one brain to rely on. Teaching Rororo to move to specific places based on hand signals was quite easy. When we arrived on dry land, I slid off Rororo and patted him on the side. "I'm going to be heading into the village for a while. While I'm gone, I want you to stay here." I specifically pointed to the ground while saying this: "Play, and don't get into trouble." I remained impassive when the Hydra gave me a sad look that was an attempt to guilt me. "Nope, you aren't convincing me with those eyes. Stay right here." Rororo's heads gave me a sad hiss before the Hydra finally laid down on the ground in defeat. With that, I quickly walked away before Rororo finally guilted me into taking him with me. As I walked to the main hub of the village, I couldn't help but think about the events that occurred yesterday. Kasha had saved a bunch of people from a sex den and brought them here to recover. I was a bit surprised when Kasha had asked me to help bring the new visitors some food, but I was highly willing to aid her. It was the right thing to do, and as a representative of my tribe, I needed to make a good impression to everyone here. In addition to the new guests that were brought here, I had also spotted a few goblins and ogres that had recently joined the village. From what I learned, word was being spread, both near us and in the forest of Tob, about Kasha's village. It wasn't surprising to see others willing to so easily join this settlement. After all, non-humans were mostly discriminated against in this part of the world. While elves and dwarves had it slightly easier due to how similar to humans they were in comparison to other races didn't have it that easy. The only places nearby that were good to non-humans was the Dwarf Kingdom, yet that only really applied to dwarves, the Elf Kingdom, same as the Dwarf Kingdom but with elves, and the Ardland Council State. Of these three places, while the Dwarf Kingdom was probably the easiest to reach without encountering humans, that didn't necessarily mean that the terrain was easy to cross. Next would be the Ardland Council State, yet the hindrance with traveling there was one would need to traverse the Re-Estize Kingdom, and that was full of risks since, while not as racially intolerant as the Slain Theocracy, it still was filled with enough intolerant humans. Finally, going to the Elf Kingdom was absolute suicide. Getting there would require traversing the Slain Theocracy, and they had a policy of either killing or enslaving all non-humans. So, Kasha's settlement being located so close to the forest of Tob and in the middle of all these hostile places was a safe haven to any demi-human that lived nearby. It also helped that Kasha is a kind ruler who was often involved with the subjects of this village. Her godly power was another factor, but I found her strength as secondary to her personality. Especially because most who had her power would act like tyrants, yet she preferred to give others a choice. Honestly, I'm both worried and relieved that she hasn't tried to take over the Re-Estize Kingdom yet. As I walked through the village, I heard a voice call out my name, "Hey, Zari. Wait up." I stopped and looked around until I spotted the small hobgoblin known as Trabo run up to me. "You're finally awake, didn't expect to see you coming into the village this early." For some odd reason, Trabgo had become a close companion since I arrived here. I think part of it was due to my size and that I was a decent fighter in the arena. "Greetings, Trabgo. You seem to be in a bit of a rush this morning. Any reason as to why?" The hobgoblin finally slowed down and caught his breath when he reached my side. Then, he finally looked up at me with a frantic energy. "Just came from spreading the news to everyone else. A lot of things happened this morning that is causing the boys and others to talk. The Fox Lady finally gave the village a name. We're called Haven Lake now. While it was important to know the new name of this village, I had doubts that it fully warranted the effort it had taken to spread this message around." "Is that all you wanted to tell me?" I asked with a smirk. Trabgo shook his head before adding, "There is more, Zari. The Fox Lady has taken in some of the humans, elves, and half-elves that were brought in yesterday. Map and I have been going around the village all morning to let everyone know." That was interesting. The addition of humans would very likely cause changes within the power dynamics of the village. Currently, while everyone followed and obeyed Kasha to the best of their abilities, and obeyed any leaders that she appointed, there was still a hierarchy of strength, mainly enforced by the orcs and trolls. Even if only the orcs and trolls followed this hierarchy, it still affected how they interacted with others. With the goblins and hobgoblins being the physically weakest beings here, adding humans and elves would shift the goblins and hobgoblins even lower in the hierarchy that had been implemented. "How have the others been taking the news?" I asked in interest. "Some of the boys are nervous about bringing in humans. They've only ever dealt with humans on bad terms, so they have reservations about the whole situation. Others, like Laha, think that the humans will be helpful, especially in giving us an appearance of strength." Trabgo replied as he started walking, causing me to follow after him. "I doubt that you or they'll have much to worry about. Kasha has been good at keeping everything under control, and the addition of humans, elves, and half-elves isn't going to change that," I said in an attempt to reassure the highly strung hobgoblin. "What makes you think that I'm worried, Zari? Really, I'm curious about how we've got people to cook now." I couldn't help but give Trabo a questioning glance. "Really, there are cooks now?" "Well, one is a baker, and another is a cook. Trabgo then gave a suspicious glance around the area for potential listeners before adding, "I've never had fresh bread before and I'm interested in trying it." I chuckled at the hobgoblin's curiosity. "Then it appears that it's your lucky day," I remarked while patting the hobgoblin on the back. In other news, my fishery has been thriving since its development. No problems with the fish, which means that there will soon be fish on the menu. Really? It's only been 2 days since you started up that fish house. What makes you think that it's thriving? Trabgo asked in curiosity. His question was understandable since from his point of view I've only started this project 2 days ago. This is the second fishery that I've helped design and run. With my first fishery, there were risks of the fish either being eaten or escaping. On average, I would expect to be missing 1 or 2 fish a day to predators. That, or one might find an opening in my fencing that they would use to escape out of. With the new fishery design that is being used, it prevents predators from attacking the fish and the stone fencing has less risks of openings being created. So, I'm proud to say that I haven't noticed any drop in the fish population. I answered with a bit of pride. "You know better than me about the whole fish stuff," Trabgo said with a shrug. "I wish you luck on that." Trabgo then tapped his finger on his head, as if he was attempting to remember something. Finally, after a few more moments, Trabgo finally remembered what he wanted to say. "By the way, you joining in on the arena today? I've been hearing that the ogre named Dolg has been eyeing you up after your victory yesterday." Yesterday had been a unique experience for me. I had learned about a small fighting arena that had been set up by the ogres and trolls, so I became interested in seeing it for myself. At first, I hadn't planned to enter as a fighter since I only wanted to spectate. After all, it wasn't every day that one got to watch ogres and trolls fighting one another without being on the receiving end of their massive fists. It was only from some convincing by Trabgo that I fought in one of the matches. I considered it a learning experience as I rarely fought ogres due to the danger involved, and I have never fought a troll before. While ogres had great strength and size, they didn't compare to a troll. Trolls were typically larger and stronger with the addition of having a healing factor to back it up. An ogre could be taken down with attrition, but a troll couldn't, they'd just regenerate from the damage unless special precautions were used. My match was against an ogre named Pars. While the fight had been tough, I managed to beat Pars by fighting safely and letting him tire himself out as he tried to attack me while I used my greater speed and smaller size to dodge his strikes. At the right moment, I struck Pars's exposed head which put him down, earning me the win. While I can't confirm it, I had reason to suspect that the goblins were treating me like I was their warrior defender. I couldn't fully put my finger on it, but there were moments where I thought that I could spot a few goblins making flags with my crude likeness. Yet, whenever I tried to investigate, they'd scatter from me with whatever evidence they had. "Guess I'll keep my eyes out for him," I answered. "I'll still be rooting for ya. So will the rest of the boys." I smiled at the encouragement. "Fighting aside, where are you heading off to? I'm certain that the lake is from where you just came from." I didn't really have a destination in mind. I just felt like exploring since there isn't much else I could do besides stare at fish. In addition, my main reason for being here in the first place is to explore the village and establish diplomatic ties, so I can't just live like a hermit. "Oh yeah, I forgot that you're supposed to be doing that diplomacy stuff. With the rate that people are joining the village, I kinda figured you to be another joiner. I'm not opposed to becoming a permanent resident. There are many ideas that Kasha and I have discussed which I have always wanted to implement with my tribe, but I lack the resources to do so. With Kasha's assistance, they are actually possible." Speaking of ideas, I couldn't help but be taken back to the first few years that I acted as a traveler for my tribe. During my travels, I saw many unique technologies utilized by other settlements and civilizations. While I had wanted to try a few of these technologies, my tribe lacked the time, effort or resources required to make them. The fishery was one of the few things I could attempt since it didn't require supplies that my village didn't already have. Hopefully you decide to stay here. The arena fights would become boring otherwise, especially when most of the fights end up between the same ogres and trolls. At least it's nice to know that I'm appreciated, even if it's for my fighting ability instead of my worldly experience. Trabgo gave my leg a reassuring pat when I admitted this. Don't worry, your worldly experience is still appreciated here. Both Trabgo and I jumped in surprised before we quickly turned to see the grinning face of Kasha. By the gods, do you really have to startle us like that? I asked while my heartbeat began slowing down. Do I have to? No, I don't. But is it really funny? Yes, it really is. The trickster deity answered. Still, I hope you're having a good morning. No doubt that Trabgo has already alerted you to the changes that have occurred. I nodded, giving the woman reason to continue. Well, that is what brings me here today, since I'll need to borrow Trabgo. Wait, you need me? What for? The curious hobgoblin asked. With the influx of people that have joined us today, quite a few need a bit of a helping hand in acclimating to life here. After a bit of thinking, I found that you were the perfect candidate in helping out. Kasha answered confidently. While I'm not saying no to your decision, I don't understand why me. Wouldn't Map be a better choice? He's the better talker than I am. Kasha simply gave Trabgo a knowing smile before she knelt down to the hobgoblin's eye level and said, You're correct that Mahab is a bit more charismatic than you, but that's because he's more practiced in talking to others, which also means that he's already too occupied with his other duties around the village. I've chosen you because we need more conversationalists and you're the best candidate. Trabgo's unease appeared to lessen with Kasha's answer, and in fact, he looked more confident. Of course, Fox Lady. I'll get this job done. Just lead the way. Kasha gave Trabgo a nod and stood up. Then, come along. Before she and Trabgo left me, Kasha said over her shoulder to me, By the way, I've put a bet on you winning in the arena tonight. Good luck. I didn't even get to answer her statement as she and Trabgo had left me alone to my thoughts once more. What I found to be very unfortunate with Kasha's sudden appearance was that I had just lost my conversation companion. Guess it was time to go back to exploring the village on my own. Maybe I'll investigate what the newcomers are doing. Kasha. As Nina and I walked down the street, I could tell that we were receiving many stares, excluding the looks I typically received on a day-to-day basis. I knew the reason why that was, namely due to the pair of small, black, wooden chests that each of us carried in our arms. While the chests looked very boring in design, the edges of the lid and the lock were covered in a golden metal that made them look valuable. Depending on how much I could get for selling the items inside, then their contents would be worthy of being contained within. The reason that Nina and I were traveling about Rantle at the moment was because the Swords of Darkness, Tyr, and I had split up after we settled down and made plans. Tyr and Lucrute were going to meet with his cousin about getting Tyr a job. Peter and Dine headed to the guild to look at any available jobs and to find out more information on that pyrite mission. As for Nina and myself, I had been interested in getting an idea on the skill level of alchemy in this world. So, I had a pair of small chests loaded up with an array of potions, most of which were made with easily replaceable ingredients or had been mass-produced previously. This meant that there were basic healing potions, potions that temporarily boosted stats, gave magic resistance, toughness, etc. The diverse stock would also allow me to learn which potion effects were more valued in this world than in Yggdrasil. Another reason that I brought Nina with B, besides for having someone to keep me company, was because she knew the location of the best potion maker in the city. The amusing part about this potion maker was that she called herself a pharmacist instead of an alchemist. Perhaps the reason for this was that pharmacist sounded like a medical profession while alchemist made one think of a crazy hermit mixing herbs into a boiling cauldron. While both classes existed within Yggdrasil and had similar abilities to one another, I always thought that alchemist sounded a lot cooler. Any idea on how much further we have to travel? I asked Nina, who appeared to be struggling with carrying the weight of the chest. I wouldn't blame her for tiring as we'd been walking for about 20 minutes while carrying these chests. Voicing my concern, I asked, You doing okay, kiddo? I can give you a hand if you need it. I wouldn't wish to put more work on you, Kasha. You're already carrying a lot like I am. Besides, we'll be arriving at Bear Pharmacy in a minute or two. Even though Nina insisted that I not put more burden on myself, I positioned one of my tails underneath the chest and lifted it to reduce the strain on Nina's arms. It took a few moments before the mage noticed how much lighter the chest had become. "Kasha, did you cast a spell on this chest when I wasn't looking?" I simply gave the girl a smile before whistling in a guilty manner. "Come on, don't keep quiet while acting so suspiciously." "Maybe," was my only response, causing Nina to groan. It reminded me of the way a child acted when an adult used the "you'll understand when you're older" excuse. I was amused regardless for the rest of the journey. "We're here. It's the building with the crest above it," Nina stated, causing my eyes to scan the buildings around us until I spotted the place that she was talking about. The pharmacy was a building made of whitish stone material, and whose pattern was only broken up by the wooden windows along with a pair of doors that stretched across the front of the first floor. Separating the first and second floors of the building was a wooden overhang, while above it was a crest that very likely represented a pharmacy in this world. Looking a bit closer, I was able to tell that the crest was carved out of the stone material of the building. If I recalled my history correctly, shops in medieval ages used signs with images instead of letters so as to inform the illiterate of what service a place performed. While in my world, signs like that were used more for decoration, I always thought that they looked nice and gave places some character. With renewed effort, Nina and I marched over to the establishment. "Hey, kiddo, you have any experience dealing with this pharmacy owner?" I asked. Most adventurers have had dealings with this place on one occasion or another. This place is owned and run by an older woman named Lizzie, but she also is aided by her grandson, Furya. Most adventurers in the city like to use her services since her prices are fair and she gives small discounts to verified adventurers. Another reason that she is preferred is due to her ability to remember the names and faces of her previous customers, Nina recalled. Remembering the names and faces of customers is a good business strategy. It causes customers to feel like they're important since the salesperson took the time to memorize who their customers are. This was a strategy that I had learned from a coworker who was once a former car salesman, at least until the company he worked for was bought out and he was fired. "Hopefully, this Lizzie can live up to her fair prices," I remarked as the pair of us arrived at the door to the pharmacy. Freeing up one of my hands, I pulled the door open and motioned for Nina to enter. When she did, I followed in and shut the door behind us. What I first noticed was the multitudes of scents ingrained into the building that could only come from years of potion making. In addition, while there was store counter with a wall of shelving filled with potions, it wasn't as eye-catching as the massive copper tank that seemed like it would be better suited in a meadery. Aside from this contraption, there were multiple devices that wouldn't look out of place in a science lab. I quickly ended my observations and focused my attention at a boy with blonde hair that hung low enough to cover his eyes. He stood behind the wooden counter with a friendly expression on his face. "Hello there, my name's Furya. How can I help you two today?" the boy asked as Nina and I approached the counter and set the chests down upon it. "We're here to get an appraisal on a couple of potions, and if possible, sell them. Would you be able to do that?" I asked Teen as I popped open one of the chests to reveal the cork tops of multiple potion bottles that were divided from one another by dark velvet cloth. A look of surprise appeared on the blonde's face at the number of bottles there were within. May I look?" he asked me hesitantly. I gave him a nod and watched as he pulled out a basic healing potion from the chest. First, he looked at the bottle in his hand, then back to me, then back at the bottle, again in rapid succession. "What kind of potion is this?" "It's a healing potion. One of a couple I brought with me." "Why do you ask?" The moment I said this, both Nfurya and Nina looked incredulously at the item. I even noticed that Nfurya's had changed his grip on the bottle like it was a delicate egg. "Could you come with me? My grandma is in the other room. Also, bring the chests as well," he asked quickly, which I answered with a nod. I watched as he half walked and half jogged to a door behind him with the potion in hand. Closing the lid of the chest before Nina and I picked up both, I leaned over and asked, "Is there any reason that both you and Nferia are acting like I brought the Holy Grail to this shop?" "The what?" "Actually, never mind. I've seen healing potions before, and they've always been blue. Never before have I ever seen a red healing potion until now. I can't imagine what Nferia must be thinking right now." That gave me reason to ponder. So, healing potions in this world were blue? Was there a difference that made one better than the other, or was this just a quirk about this new world compared to Yggdrasil? Well, my questions would likely be answered soon enough by either Nferia or Lizzie. So, Nina and I quickly made our way to the next room to see the blonde teen speaking quickly with an elderly woman wearing a green bandana. Their conversation was broken up when the sound of my heels clicking against the floorboards alerted them to my presence. Nferia was the first to speak. "Just a moment, miss. My grandma is about to appraise your potion." As he said this, the older woman held her hand out. "Appraisal magic item. Detect enchant." She spoke as a green light shined in her hand before covering the potion. After a few moments, the light faded and she began laughing for a reason that I couldn't understand. For a moment, I was worried that Lizzie had just gone senile, at least until she looked to me with a pair of intelligent blue eyes. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "It's better than that. Do you understand what it is that you've brought to my shop?" she asked excitedly. Raising a questioning eyebrow at how this woman was acting, I answered unsurely, "A basic healing potion. What's so special about it?" In legend, it is said that all alchemists and pharmacists learned the art of making potions from the gods themselves. Yet, even with these teachings, mortals could only make flawed copies that were only a shadow of the originals and were colored blue to mark them as such. She answered before pointing to the healing potion on her table. "A true potion of healing is colored like the blood of the gods, and for time uncounted, none have ever been able to produce a potion of this quality. If one were to drink this, it'd be like utilizing a second-tier healing spell." What quickly dawned on me as she said this was that potions of this world were only equivalent to healing of the first tier. "Please, dear girl, would you tell me where you acquired this potion?" Lizzie desperately asked. I also felt an uncomfortable number of eyes just fixated on me, especially when I set the chest in my arms down, opened it, and pulled another basic healing potion out. This caused Lizzie's eyes to almost bulge out of her skull and me to force down the laughter from seeing such an expression. "I have a couple more that I brought in this chest and a bunch more stored elsewhere. Both I and a colleague of mine made them." The second those words left my lips, Lizzie immediately shouted out, "I will pay you 30,000 gold if you were to teach me the method to make these potions." I didn't know what surprised me more, the energy that she was displaying for her age or that she had so much gold available to her. Still, whatever I said next would either make or break this conversation. In addition, while I knew how healing potions were made, namely by combining 3 specific ingredients named Yunkstone, Viefel Dragonstone, and Gold Nostrum, of which I had a limited stock. Of the 3 ingredients, I could only restock up on the gold nostrum since it was derived from pulping the nostrum rose, which was a plant that I had stocked in my garden. Unfortunately, the Yunk stone was only attained from mining deposits of Yunks, while the Viefel Dragonstone was gained from item drops by a Viefel dragon. I highly doubted that both resources existed in this world, the dragon specifically because it was only found in the realm of Muspelheim in Yggdrasil. "Lizzie, you don't need to pay me so much to learn how to make these potions since I'd be very willing to teach you for free." Everyone in the room was astounded that I would so easily turn down such a large offer of money. The only thing that I'm questioning is why Nina wouldn't expect me to do so. From the way that Lizzie was so eager to offer a king's ransom, I believed that she had the money available. But I was also willing to bet that all of that money was set aside for supplies, alchemical and pharmaceutical instruments, and living expenses. I wasn't going to jeopardize her life and business for money. "But your knowledge is worth a kingdom. Why would you turn down all that money so easily? Anyone else would immediately take this offer." Lizzie asked incredulously. I smiled at the elderly pharmacist and shrugged. I don't need the money and you want to learn. Besides, it's a simple recipe made up of 3 ingredients. I held up 3 of my fingers for emphasis. What you need to do is mix together a yunque stone, a Viefel dragon stone, and gold nostrum. Amazing, Lizzie stated as she rushed over to a table with a leather book next to an inkpot and quill before flipping through the book to find an empty page. As she did so, I noticed that the pages were full of potion recipes. Finally, she found a page and wrote down the ingredients that I told her, then the manic energy within her faded as she read the names of each ingredient. Would you be willing to tell me what these ingredients are? I've never heard of them before until now. That's part of the problem, I said with a slight grimace. From what I've seen, none of the ingredients can be found in these lands except for one, the gold nostrum. The yunque stone is found by mining a specific substance, while the Viefel dragon can only be found in a specific land within my home country. Even though I broke the bad news to Lizzie, she didn't look as disappointed as I expected her to. Either that or she was good at hiding it. You said that gold nostrum could be found here? Lefaya asked with interest. I nodded in reply. Grandma, do you think that we could possibly substitute the missing ingredients from this woman's land with what we have here? This caused both Lizzie and I to think about this idea with interest. Especially since it'd be very helpful for Haven Lake to have a method of healing besides me. I know that I won't always be available, and my healing potions from Yggdrasil were in a limited supply, so another version of a healing potion using ingredients from this world would certainly ease my worries about the village. It's certainly a possibility, my boy. Suddenly, Lizzie turned to me and looked like she was about to speak when I interrupted her. If you're going to ask about the gold nostrum, I can tell you that the substance is acquired from the nostrum rose, the plant and seeds of which are located in my lodgings in the city, so you're lucky in that regard. I took note of how strangely smug I sounded when I told the pharmacist this. I think we could come to an arrangement since I, too, am interested in seeing if Nferya's idea is possible. Lizzie's brow was furrowed in contemplation, then she answered, I believe that we can make an agreement. She fumbled for a moment, as if trying to recall who I was before giving up. What's your name? Kasha Blanc. I just arrived in Rantel and joined the Adventurers Guild a few days ago. As I said this, her eyes were filled with recognition before she gave the copper tag hanging around my neck a curious look. Strange. Lizzie muttered to herself before speaking up once more. Still, we can settle those matters after the rest of our business. It seems that you brought more potions that you'd like me to inspect. The woman gave a nod to the open chest on the ground, causing me to pick it up and bring it over to her. Both Nina and Nferya were silent as Lizzie cast spells to appraise and detect individual potions. Even though Lizzie was hiding her astonishment at my stock, the sweat beading down the sides of her forehead said otherwise. Yet, that didn't deter her from writing down the estimated price and effect of each potion. It was actually quite professional work as she wrote the list in an organized fashion based on where the potions were located in the chests, yet when she was done, it seemed like she had just finished running a marathon. Finally, she turned to me and said, I'll buy up your entire stock. Nferya, she commanded hastily, causing the boy to nervously stand at attention, take Nina with you and pay her the money owed. I need to speak with Kasha privately. Wow, Nina was correct about Lizzie remembering names and faces. Still, both teens picked up the chest, and Nferya grabbed the piece of parchment that Lizzie had written the information down on and left the room. With only the two of us together, the older woman sighed before leaning against the table. All of those potions you brought were either stronger than anything that potion makers could craft or had effects that even I had never heard of before except in legends dating back to when gods roamed the world. Who and or what are you? I snapped my finger and caused a chair to appear out of thin air which I sat in. If Lizzie had any opinion on this display of magic, then she did well at hiding it. I'm Kasha Blanc, of which my current titles of many are adventurer, traveler, sorceress, and teacher. Who do you think that I am? It was hard to deny that I was extremely intrigued by whatever conclusion that Lizzie might arrive at. You may not know this, but I've heard talk about you stirring up within the city. Talk of which has claimed that you can cast third-tier spells. And yet, you've come here with secrets about potions known only to the gods, which is beyond the ability of a simple third-tier caster. My first guess would be that you're from the slain theocracy and are on the run from them for one reason or another, and yet, your clothing style and terminology do not hail from that country. Another is that you're somehow related to the gods, either through blood or worship. I'll let you know now, I'm from a land that's completely uncharted by any country in this part of the world. But I'll give you one hint, you're on the right track for some aspects, I said with amusement. Even though I knew that I should keep my identity as a human intact, I couldn't help but amuse myself with this little guessing game. It was a little worrying. Lizzie was silent for a bit longer until she finally gasped and looked at me in a new light. Before she could voice her guess, I held my hand up to stop her. How about you keep your guess to yourself, otherwise it might ruin the surprise. Besides, we never know who might be listening. As I said this, my ears picked up on the noise of footsteps quickly scurrying away from the door. Identity aside, I have an offer that I think could benefit both of our parties. What is it? I'll give you a few nostrum rose seeds and a bottle of gold nostrum. In return, I'd like to know about any of the findings that your research gives you. In addition, you can keep all profits of the end product for yourself, since I don't want them. But I'd like some stock of the potions if you finish them. With this offer, I was giving her everything while asking for very little in return. A less honorable person might just take everything and run, yet Lizzie didn't seem the type to dishonor her agreements. In addition, the guessing game that we played earlier had the benefit of making Lizzie see me as someone to not upset. Her blue eyes met my orange, as if trying to look for something in my gaze. I accept. With a smirk, I nodded and got up from my chair, causing it to disperse as I did so. Wailing over to the elder pharmacist, I held my hand out and Lizzie shook it with her own. Then I'm pleased to start this wonderful partnership with you. I'll bring the seeds and ingredients to your shop tomorrow, I said before breaking our handshake and walking to the door of the main shop. Before I left, I turned back and added, also, try to keep our guessing game private. I left before she could say anything. In the front room of the pharmacy, Nina could be seen collecting a small chest of gold from Nferia. And that's 327. Are you sure that you'll be able to carry this? The boy asked uncertainly. Nina gave a grunt of effort as she tried to lift the chest, but she quickly gave up after the chest showed no sign of budging. Having a bit of trouble, kiddo? I asked, causing both teens to jump at my arrival and also gave me reason to question how those two didn't hear the noise my shoes made on the floorboards. By the way, the pair of you need to work on your sneaking skills. Saying this, I walked up to the counter with the chest and shocked both of the teens with the way that I easily deadlifted the heavy container. Truthfully, I was cheating by using my tails to lift the chest, not that I was going to let Nina know anytime soon. Hey, kiddo, did the transaction go without a hitch? Yes, Kasha. Nferia and I got everything taken care of. Nina answered. Excellent work, kiddo. Nferia, it was a pleasure meeting and doing business with you. Your grandmother can explain a bit more about what we discussed. Until then, have a good day. Nferia quickly nodded. Same as well, Lady Kasha. The formality that Nferia was showing me was because either he and Nina listened to quite a bit of Lizzie and my conversation or Nina had told him something. Still, both Lizzie and Nferia would be helpful in getting my name spread throughout the city and I wasn't opposed to it. Preceding this, both Nina and I left the store much richer than before, well, rich with this world's currency. The items of mine which were stored away would probably be worth an entire kingdom based upon how my most basic items were exceptionally stronger than this world's. Still, I was pleased at the way that my business with the pharmacy went, especially because there could be a way to create potions using the substances of this world as a substitute. If the experiments that Lizzie and Nferia were going to perform bared fruit, I'd have to set up a grow-op in Haven Lake. It could also be a potential export, though the product would need to be sold to cities other than Erantle since I had no wish to compete with Lizzie's business. I also felt that doing so would be dishonorable since Lizzie was helping me just as much as I was helping her. Kasha, why didn't you mention earlier that your potions were so powerful? I've never seen a potion that gives one a resistance to the elements until today, and that's just one example. Giving Nina a raised eyebrow, I could only shrug in answer. Truthfully, most of the potions that I sold today were the weakest variations that I had. For instance, that potion to resist elements just makes one resistant to extreme heat and cold for 2 minutes. The stronger version I have makes you immune and lasts 8 hours. As I said this, Nina's jaw dropped. Please, don't tell me that you can make an even stronger version of that healing potion. Sorry to disappoint you, but I can. So can Meepo, Nina sighed in exasperation. You've seen a bit of what I can do. At this point you should be getting used to my ridiculous ability to defy conventional logic and power. Which also reminds me, opening up the small black portal to my inventory, I shoved the chest inside to free up my hands. Nina looked like she was about to say something, but gave up midway and changed the subject. Guess that our next stop is to the guild. Do you think that the others managed to finish up their tasks as well? For Peter and Dine, I'd be completely surprised if they hadn't finished up by now. With Lucrute and your sister, it's a 50-50 wager since getting Tyre set up with a job will take a while longer. I reasoned with a giggle. I could see that happening, Nina remarked with a smirk. Also, when do you think we'll train today? I'd like to do so after we meet the others at the guild, as I highly doubt that we'll be performing a job today since we have to get everything arranged for Tyre. But, as I said before, we'll be stress testing your abilities since I want to see what I'm working with. From there, I'll figure out which spells you should learn to expand your spell portfolio. Aside from just learning spells, I also wanted to teach Nina in ways to be creative with her spell use. You could cast a fireball, yet that would cost a lot of mana at lower levels, or you could cast Oil Slick, which was a first-tier spell that covered a decent area, and add a Firebolt to light the oil on fire, which would perform the same action as a fireball, but at a considerably reduced cost. What distinguished a good mage character in Yggdrasil was their ability to creatively use weak spells to perform powerful effects. At least, that was true for the lower tier and middle tier players. At higher tier, your skill was determined by your ability to use delayed spells with time stop. Mastering these skills were fundamental in PvP combat since high-level caster battles were determined by skill and attrition. It was easy to avoid a high-tiered spell by countering it, blocking it, or teleporting out of the way. The mage casting the high-tiered spell would use up more mana than the one avoiding it. But that could be countered by synergizing a multitude of weaker spells together since their overall mana cost was much lesser than teleporting out of the way. Summed up, fights between a pair of good casters tended to be a more explosive version of a chess. Even I used to fight like this until my racial classes made the strategy suboptimal due to my mana regeneration and ludicrous mana limit. It was far easier to overwhelm opponents with high-tier spells since they'd run out of mana eventually while I would have barely dipped. Then I'll see what I can do to impress you. She hesitantly boasted, causing me to playfully tousle her hair. We'll see, kiddo. After a bit of walking, Nina and I finally made it to the Adventurers Guild and noticed that it was still fairly packed with people. Any reason that there are so many people at the guild today? Nina asked with interest as we pushed past a few people and entered the building. From what the others told me earlier, a pyrite mission was handed out today. It's to escort a few members of the Magicians Guild through the Great Forest of Tob. Apparently, the pay is pretty good, so there have been a lot of low-ranked adventurers that are desperate for the job. I answered as I looked around the guild for the others. That's interesting. The Magicians Guild doesn't offer that many jobs to our guild, so this is a rare occurrence. Nina remarked. While I hadn't thought that much about the pyrite mission today, hearing Nina mention this tidbit made me curious. What was so interesting to the Magicians Guild that they'd wish for an escort into Tob? It also slightly worried me because of the way that I'd established my presence in Lake, since it could make trouble for the Greenclaw tribe if the mission took them near that area. Before I could think more on this, Both mine and Ninia's names were called by Peter as he and Diane approached us. The first thing I noticed about the two men were their expressions. While Peter did well in concealing his emotions, Diane's face was filled with worry. "Glad to see you two finally finished your task. Did everything go smoothly or did anything happen?" Peter greeted. "Oh, nothing that Ninia and I couldn't handle. What about the two of you? The both of you look like someone just kicked you in the balls," I answered, causing Peter to nervously laugh while scratching the back of his head. "That obvious, huh? Well, thing is, Guildmaster Pluton approached both Diane and I earlier and asked us to do something. Specifically, to have us ask you to meet him in his office when you finally arrived at the guild." Ninia let out a small gasp at hearing this. "But Pluton Einsack almost never asks anyone to meet him unless it's really important. He only ever does so if he's banishing someone from the guild, promoting them to ranks above platinum, or because a person with high standing asked him to meet with a guild member," Ninia nervously stated as she looked at me. "If he wants to meet with me, I don't see an issue with it. I've only been here a few days, so I'm positive that I haven't gotten into trouble for something that I might have done," I said in an attempt to reassure the three adventurers while also giving Ninia a wink. "I'll be back before anyone starts to miss me. Now, mind pointing me to the man's office?" "His office is down the hall on the left," Diane answered before adding, "Good luck with the meeting, and try to avoid upsetting Pluton. I know stories of adventurers that angered him and ended up stuck at a low rank for years." I acknowledged the concern with a nod and left the three to head upstairs. I wouldn't say that I was worried as I made my way to Pluton's office, also I couldn't help but get a small chuckle at how close the Guildmaster's name was to the dwarf planet Pluto. At the very least, the man's name was something unique in comparison to those of the kingdom's cities. A bit more walking and I eventually found myself standing before the office door of Pluton. The door itself was quite bare, lacking anything ornate to distinguish itself as the barrier to a guildmaster's office if not for the words Guildmaster that looked like it had been carved into the door with a knife. With a shrug, I turned the brass handle of the door and opened it to reveal a room containing only a desk, an armor and weapons stand, and a crude map of the kingdom that was nailed into the back wall. Sitting at the desk was a large man with the body of a 40-year-old but the hair color of someone in their 60s. My first thought upon seeing him was that he looked like he belonged on a battlefield, not at a desk. Even the weapon resting on its stand looked well polished and ready to decapitate any fool that challenged this man. The clothing he wore looked well tailored and clean, yet the man's musculature was still able to stretch those clothes. With his well-combed moustache and hair, I half expected this man to rip his shirt off by flexing his muscles before challenging me to 3 rounds in a boxing ring. I had no doubt that when he was younger, Pluton was easily able to woo women with his looks. When I entered, Pluton stopped writing on a sheet of parchment and looked up at me with full attention and a friendly demeanor. "You must be Kasha Blanc, I presume?" "I am. And you're Pluton Einsack, I hope. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I've entered the wrong room," I joked as I approached the man's desk. He gave a good-natured laugh and set his quill into an ink pot. "No, you are not wrong. This is my office, even if it isn't as impressive as one might believe a guildmaster's office should be," he replied. "At least you're one of the few to come here that hasn't shit their britches upon speaking with me. I like that. Same couldn't be said about my team. They all acted like the Grim Reaper was coming for my soul when they heard you wanted to meet me," I replied. "Not that I could blame them, you're pretty intimidating from what I've heard." "Only when I need to be. I've heard many rumors about myself during my tenure as Guildmaster. The most amusing one was about how I forced a man that angered me to climb a tree for a week to scare away the birds." "And why would you have someone climb a tree for a week in the first place?" Pluton looked at me with all seriousness before answering, "Because I didn't want to hear the woodpeckers." I snorted in amusement when I heard this. "Woodpeckers aside, how much do you know about the Magicians Guild?" "Just that they perform magic and made a job request for our guild today." "While that's very broad, it's understandable considering that you're new to this country. The Magician's Guild involves itself with anything pertaining to magic in the country, that would also include casters such as yourself. I'm surprised that no one told you, but there's a rule that all new magic casters must be registered to the guild. I raised a questioning eyebrow at this statement. But considering that you appear to be a competent mage, said requirement is lessened. And why do all the new magic casters need to be registered with the Magician's Guild? Seems like a way piss off a lot of people that can conjure fire at will. Officially, the Magician's Guild does so to safely train new magic casters and prevent accidents such as creating a forest fire or flooding a farm. It's reasonable since more than one forest and village has been burned to the ground because a new mage didn't know how to control their magically conjured fire. From the matter-of-fact way that Pluton said this, it seemed like this has happened way too often, but it was understandable to see something like this in a world where anyone with the ability could learn how to cast spells. It was like giving a kid a gun without training and expecting them not to accidentally shoot someone. I had no idea how old one had to be to cast spells in this world, but if a 5-year-old could cast Firebolt, then I'd be shitting myself if someone wasn't there to teach and monitor them. Still though, I couldn't just see the Magician's Guild doing this out of the kindness of their hearts. What's the unofficial reason? I asked. It's a way for them to monitor mages in the kingdom, learn whatever spells they know how to cast, and indoctrinate those young enough to be loyal. The Adventurers Guild differ from the Magicians in the way that we treat our members. For us, due to our organization being established in multiple different countries, we are neutral in country politics and very hands-off with our members, otherwise other countries might suspect us to be creating an army. With the Magician's Guild, they are only in the re-estais, making them involved in the kingdom's politics and given approval by the royal family to perform actions that our guild would never be allowed. That includes making a fighting force from the members of their guild. And that's what it comes to, doesn't it? Living weapons, an intelligent idea that I saw utilized back home with cybernetically enhanced soldiers. What does all of this have to do with me? I decided to skip the reach around and just jump to the true meat of this discussion. The Guildmaster of Rantel, Theo Riksha, has personally asked for you to be part of the escort mission for the Magician's Guild. The fact that he's asking for you specifically means that you've attracted his interest. I didn't know whether to be worried about this news or not, especially because I didn't have enough knowledge about the Magician's Guild or Theo Riksha to make an opinion. From the way this discussion is going, I'm getting the feeling that there isn't a choice in this matter. Is there? There is certainly a choice, Miss Blanc. You could say no, but that also means that you'd be drawing the ire of a politically strong guild with multiple connections upon yourself. Pluton answered with a sympathetic expression, while I'd like to say that the Adventurers Guild is here to help its members, we cannot afford to be dragged into a political dispute with their guild. So, I'm alone in this? Yes, you very much are. The sole comfort that I can give you is the promise that you won't be kicked out of the guild for whatever decision you choose to make. That said, I'll need your answer now since there is only one spot left in the mission that needs to be filled, and it's not a good idea to keep the Magician's Guild waiting. I'll join the mission then. But, I added with a small smirk, I should be made a silver plate if I'm being required to work this mission as a copper plate. Pluton didn't even seem fazed by my request. Before I answer that, I would like you to answer a question. I crossed my arms under my chest and confidently nodded. I've been hearing rumors about you, specifically about your ability to cast a 3rd-tier spell. Mind enlightening me about whether there is some truth to said rumors? You're the second person today to tell me this. Though, the rumor is correct. I can cast 3rd-tier spells. Why do you ask? Pluton gave a cocky smirk as he pulled open a drawer on his desk and pulled out a necklace before tossing it to me on the table. Picking up the item, I looked down to see a silver adventurer's plate. Consider that silver plate to be a placeholder for you. If you come back from the job, there'll be a platinum plate waiting for you. I gave him a questioning stare as I took off the copper plate necklace and replaced it with the silver plate. Any reason for why I'm being elevated to the rank of a platinum plate so quickly? An unspoken rule about the ranking system is this: if a member performs a feat that belongs to a specific rank, then they'll be promoted to said rank unless they demonstrate that they're unworthy of it. For platinum plates, a method to skip the grind to that rank is to display an ability to cast third-tier spells. While normally, a test would be performed, the fact that the Magician's Guild is interested in you gives credence that you are a powerful mage. If casting a known third-tier spell got me to the rank of platinum plate, I wonder what might happen if I performed an obvious fourth-tier spell, since it seemed like the guards that had seen me cast a sixth-tier spell didn't understand how powerful the spell I cast was. Now, I just had to figure out which fourth-tier spell would be the best for the job. I see. Anything I should know about the mission that wasn't said before? The mission is in 3 days and leaves the Magician's Guild at dawn. It'll take 2 to 3 days to get there and back, so pack appropriately. Everyone is on their own for supplies. If you aren't aware of it now, the forest is a wild and dangerous place, so don't let your guard down in there. Good luck, Miss Blanc. Thanks, Guildmaster Einsack. I'll see you again when I come back for the platinum plate. I replied before I walked out of the office with multiple thoughts running through my mind. Before I closed the door, I heard Pluton say to himself when he thought I was out of earshot, "Why the hell did women not look like that when I was younger?" It took all my self-control to not burst out laughing when pulled the door shut. 2 hours later. To say the others were shocked at hearing the news was an understatement. There had been a lot of questions asked, most of which I had been unable to answer. It actually got even worse when Lucrute and Tyre arrived, since Lucrute didn't stop talking until Peter smacked him upside the head. Like an alarm clock, the archer stopped asking questions and things settled down. After the question was finished, the group moved on to congratulating me and planned to take me out for drinks at a tavern as a way to celebrate. While they didn't take no for an answer, I was able to move the date for drinking to tomorrow since I wanted to finally take a crack at training Nina. That was what brought me here in one of the fields outside Rantle with Nina. And let me tell you, I had been running the little mage ragged. Currently, she was breathing heavily while sweat caked her brow. She'd gotten so overheated that she even took off the cloak that she always wore. In front of both Nina and I was a patch of earth that was sliced apart, charred, and frozen. "I can't cast Acid Arrow anymore," she gasped out as she tried to catch her breath. I hadn't been lying when I said I'd be stress testing her. For the past 2 hours, I'd been taking note of the spells she knew, how often she could cast them, and the speed at which she could do so. Anytime she ran out of mana, I'd just use Mana Font to charge her back up. For the spell, Acid Arrow, her maximum number of casts for it was 4. Even without using spells to detect it, with Yggdrasil logic, that meant that her MP bar would be at 8 since second-tier spells cost 2 mana. I was fairly impressed with her ability to use the second-tier spell since, of what I learned from Nina, only 1 in 5 to 10,000 could cast them. But what I also learned with testing Nina was when I used Discern Enemy and Mana Essence to keep track of Nina's stats, I was excited to see that when we started, Nina was at level 8. Yet, at this point she had reached level 9, alerting me that it was possible for beings in this world to level up, just like in Yggdrasil. Still, Nina had been working hard, so it was only fair to give her a break. Quickly refilling her mana back up with mine, Nina looked ready to cast some more until I interrupted. "Relax, kiddo. Time to take a break." The young mage sighed in relief as she collapsed to the ground and laid on her back, breathing heavily. "I've never had tea to work that hard before." The teen gasped out while I took a seat right next to her. "That's because you've never had a way to quickly recover your mana until you met me," I answered. "Still, how do you feel after all of that hard work?" "Like someone sucked the life out of me, and shoved it back in." Not exactly untrue. Laying my back on the ground and propping my head up with my arms, I couldn't help but gaze at the blue sky. It felt greedy to constantly take glances at the sky, expecting it to turn into the polluted greys and blacks that I was used to. That just means that you're getting stronger. Training is hard work, and hard work is never easy. Else it'd be called easy work. But if you tough out the pain and push through it all, you'll keep getting better. For a while, the pair of us was silent until Nina asked a question that threw me off guard. "Hey, Kasha? Who was it that taught you magic?" Referring to my backstory, I went with Inori being the one since it was the most logical. "My mother," I answered. "What's she like?" Now that one was going to be a bit harder. Just when I was in the middle of trying to conjure up a story, words began to flow out of my mouth and I couldn't tell if they were mine or something else. "She's kind, a bit of a trickster, but also very wise. While she could easily use her power to conquer, she preferred peace and instead used her abilities and magic to aid her people. I've no doubt that she'd love to meet you if she could." When I finally stopped talking, I just remained speechless and worried. Then, I tried to picture my mother's face, my mother back home from Earth. Yet, I couldn't. Her face was a blur. Maybe she had dark hair or red hair, I couldn't tell. I felt my breath almost hitch in my chest, but I pushed my thoughts down so that Nina wouldn't worry. She's worried about her sister for years, she didn't need something else to become upset about. She sounds nice. I wish that I could remember my mother better, but both her and Dad died when I was very young. What's sad is that when I think about my mother, I pictured her because she's always been there. I looked at Nina with a saddened gaze. "Oh, kiddo. But it's not all bad. Even though it's hard to remember her face, I still can recall her voice. She was a kind person, like you." I lightly patted Nina on the shoulder and caused her to meet my gaze. "I think she'd be happy to see the person you are today. Even if it's hard to remember what she looks like, remember the person that she was, and then you'll never lose her." She smiled at this and gazed back at the sky while I did the same. After a while, the sound of snoring filled my ears, followed by a new warmth at my side. Gazing out the corner of my eye, I saw Nina sleeping against my side. Guess training could end a bit early today, I muttered before gazing back at the blue sky. "Zarasu." Ducking under a swing from the massive fist of an ogre, I cracked my tail like a whip against the exposed heel of my opponent. This elicited a scream of pain from the ogre, Dolg, as he fell to his knee and I back away to reassess my situation. The cheering of ogres and goblins around me filled my ears as I began circling Dolg, watching for the perfect moment to strike. Tonight was something special as Kasha had renovated the arena for the fights. The arena was sunk into the ground while angled walls 20 feet high prevented fighters from accidentally flung into the stands or those in the stands from dying if they fell over the walls. Instead, they'd simply slide to the bottom of the arena. To exit the arena, multiple large handholds had been carved into the rock, allowing finished fighters the ability to climb out. Multiple benches surrounded the edges of the arena walls, where multiple goblins, ogres, trolls, and some of the new visitors were watching with interest. Yet, sitting in a chair overseeing the entire event was Kasha in all her glory. Well, her and her clone who sat in a similar chair next to her. "You may have fat tail, but I have bigger hands," Dolg shouted before charging at me. I took note of the way he limped, that my hit from earlier was taking its toll. Staying still until Dolg was only a few feet away from me, I finally rolled out of the way and kicked out Dolg's ankle, causing the massive ogre's face to impact the wall with a meaty smack before finally falling onto his back. "Just because you have bigger hands doesn't mean that you have a bigger brain," I taunted to the groaning ogre as he rolled onto his hands and pushed himself back up to his feet, one hand holding his bleeding head. "You still going to keep coming?" I asked while bouncing from one foot to the next. "I'm strong. I'm tough. I'm. Dolg's boast soon died down as he started to become woozy until finally, with a great thud, the ogre fell onto his face and began snoring. For a moment, the entire audience was completely silent. "Dolg's been rendered unconscious. Zarasu wins," Kasha announced, breaking the tense silence. Following this declaration, cheers rang out, namely from the goblins and hobgoblins seated together in the stands. In triumph, I raised my fists in the air, eliciting more cheers. "You know, I'm really enjoying my time here."